This is Buffalo State Data Talk, the podcast where we introduce you to how data is used and explore careers that involve data.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Buffalo State Data Talk. I'm your host, Heather Campbell, and thank you for joining us for episode 20. Today, we'll be talking to Sunita Menon. Sunita is a global business transformation executive who has masterfully connected data and technology with people and process to achieve strategic business results for over 25 years across India and the US. In global leadership roles, Sunita led IBM's business transformation efforts by designing and implementing enterprise data strategy and governance solutions to enable cross-functional business insights for client advocacy and revenue growth. She nurtures data-driven talent and mindsets across highly matrixed global teams to achieve superior business outcomes. She is a natural storyteller and can't resist bringing storytelling to her work. Sunita recently joined as a global data ambassador and one of the top professional service firms, driving global data strategies and culture as the critical enabler for a business transformation. She also teaches data-driven strategies and data storytelling at the University of Florida College of Journalism and Communications, preparing students for the future of PR and communications. Sunita holds an executive MBA from the University of Connecticut, USA, and a bachelor's degree from Bangalore University in India. Welcome to the show, Sunita.
Thank you, Heather, and I'm so excited to be with you today to talk about data and all things data, and looking forward to hopefully interacting with the students someday.
Excellent. We're so glad to have you on the show. So, for those who may not know what a professional service firm does, could you give us a general overview of what your company does?
So, professional services firm, provide business services to individual clients or companies, and it could be in the area of, tax or audit or advisory services for business transformation and business operations.
And what do you do as the Global Data Ambassador?
So in my role as a Global Data Ambassador, I'm engaged in promoting and creating awareness of data and insights-driven mindsets and skill sets. I call it mindsets and skill sets because you need that culture to drive superior business results. So I do three things. I'm always teaching, advising, or inspiring professionals and leaders about how, regardless of the business function or the unit or the professional rank they're in, that they can understand and communicate with relevant data and insights in their space for business impact. One of the key things, in any data-driven or data-based or data-inspired environment is the values that guide our behaviors day to day, how we act, how we make decisions, how we work with each other, our clients, and our communities. And so it's all about defining and implementing ways and insights so that there's shared understanding, shared values, and shared norms for a data and insights-driven culture.
Excellent. So now we have a little bit of an idea of what you do. Could you tell us what a typical day or a typical week looks like for you?
A typical day would be, meeting people, having conversations about business challenges, relating to using data or sometimes not using data for actionable insights. So it's really listening to the need for data and insights, or either I'm engaged in planning or influencing the actions that could, make it better, a business process or a business solution, and basically influencing actions. Or I'm engaged in generating ideas and methods and content for culture change and for impact.
And what kind of data are you using?
So typically, it is data that's generated as the business is operating in day-to-day basis. It's our professionals, our leaders engage with our clients, our communities, our stakeholders, And through that life cycle of the engagement, lots of data is captured just as part of a day-to-day function. So, and that data can be, structured, unstructured, qualitative, quantitative. So the data is everywhere. So it's how you organize and sort and make it meaningful. So all kinds of data comes in place.
And what is being done with this data? What are you doing with it? How is it being used?
So, you typically, a business or any organization has a number of, business functions, business operations. For example, it could be a process about engaging the clients, which is typically known as client relationship management process, or CRM. Or it could be engaging with suppliers, vendors, partners. And data is the language of that process. Data flows within that process, and it's how the process communicates with each other in each step. Now, the maturity of the organization or the excellence in being data-driven determines how the data is being used. So I actually blogged about this 2 years ago in my LinkedIn. If you look into my LinkedIn and you look for a simple framework to understand data-driven excellence, I talk about, how the group, as they deal with the data, their questions get, their maturity of questions. Typically, groups start with what happened, and they're analyzing that. And as they mature and the process of using the data matures, they go into what is happening. And then they move into what could happen and what's the best that can make you happen. So how data is being used depends on how that team and what data-driven excellence they're following. What's the maturity curve?
Excellent. And we can put a link to that blog in the description of the episode. The results, when this data is being used and analyzed, what kind of results are being created? Dashboards, written reports, papers. What's happening with this data?
I almost want to say that it is irrelevant how the results are shared, but I really don't mean that. Typically, there's a lot of focus on preparing the data. Let's make the data clean and let's make it meaningful. And then we'll run some analysis on it and then we'll present it. Well, if something is really insightful for the business, one can determine how to present it. It's the dashboard, it's a report, it's an alert, But more often than not, two things happen. Either the entire focus is on delivering that dashboard and report, whether it's automated or paper or a beautiful presentation, and not focusing on the finish line. When I say finish line, I mean that there's a lot of data, but there's no insights to help you take an action, to help you make a decision. It's all about arranging the data in a beautiful way that doesn't tell a story and that has no insights. And so that's either it's focusing on the deliverable or it's focusing on the data but not the insights. And so that is the transformational point where teams working with data, they don't think of dashboards and reports are the ends, but there are means to the end. So all that technology and programming languages, doesn't even matter what you're using as long as, they are automating and simplifying and reducing the time to get to insights. So I would say, sharing the findings is just the beginning of the journey. The insights come. What you do after is what we should all focus on, which is less focused today.
That absolutely makes a ton of sense. And that's the whole point of doing all of the work, is getting the insights from the data. That entirely makes sense. So could you talk about a challenge that you or your team had to overcome, and how did you solve it?
So we were working on a project in my previous role where we were looking at the customer data, the clients that the business deals with, and we saw that the data changed every day. The definition of that data changed every day, and so depending on how you used it, it meant something today, and the next day the meaning has already changed. And so the challenge was that there was no stability of that definition of the data, because there was lots of people changing it, lots of people accessing it and making it to mean what they would want it to mean for their process. And so that was a challenge, because unless data has the meaning and there is a standard meaning for what the data we use, and there's a standard structure, the analysis keeps shifting. And so that's not helpful, that's not meaningful to take any actions. So we had a team put together who looked at what is the data we're talking about, how is it captured, how is it maintained, what are the quality processes against it, who can access it, who can change it, why are they changing what they change. So we listened for the need, and we solved this in a way that it's stable, it's clean, and those who need to access it accessed it, and those who can't change it. It wasn't, Wild West in terms of data management.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, was there any pushback from the employees that used to have access to change it and then were kind of revoked their access?
No, in fact, they were actually happy. And this goes back to the, change management. They were happy that they didn't have to manage it, and we involved them in the change. We didn't say, oh, you can't access anymore. We actually helped them build, why are you changing? What are you doing that is making it meaningful? And then we automated that.
Yeah, excellent. I love that. That's awesome. So what is your favorite part of your position?
So meeting people is the favorite part of my job. But I would say for the reason is so that I could understand what the business challenge is. And then how do you use data as a bridge to the business for insights? And data builds that bridge between what they're trying to do and how they can make an impact for the business.
Excellent. So you also, in addition to your role, teach a course for the University of Florida that you developed on driving PR insights. So could you tell us a little bit about that class?
We're seeing that, data and insights is as relevant for PR and comms as it is for marketing and HR and sales and all the other functions that already use this. And it's almost part of, they've built the muscle for this. So we see that PR and comms is evolving, very future focused. And they understand that this is a transformational journey. And so I'm helping the undergrads and grads in the College of Journalism and Comms to look at how do you position data. We talked about how do you use data as a bridge to the business. So how can PR and comms use data to build their value and impact for the business? And it's not about, learning a tool and, where to click and what kind of reports I can generate. I talked about that already. It's not about the reports, but it's about how do you then use the insights to make a decision, to take an action. So I teach the students on how do you position data and how do you use data. Because I always say that, no matter which function of PR and comms you go into the workforce, whether you're doing crisis comms or executive comms or corporate social responsibility or, doing content and media or media relations, data is going to be your success factor. So you need to be ready for that.
Yes, that totally makes a ton of sense. I think that's really logical. And I think more and more nowadays that people are expecting that. So the fact that you're able to bring that into your course and that you're teaching that is so important. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your career path. So you have a bachelor's in history, economics, and political science, and an MBA. So how did you end up working with data?
Yes, it's almost like what we learn is not what we do end up, right? But I think I was always a data-oriented person, as I could say. I was always reflective and analytical just about everything. I was very curious. And And that's a good trait to have for anybody working in data. So I think that was one. But the other point is, and I didn't know this then, but now I do, is that from history, I learned how people and their mindsets and the culture is evolved. From economics, I learned how people and work come together to produce wealth for a nation, for a world, and what's the science behind it. And political science gave me the knowledge and insights into how people organize systems and processes for political activity and behavior and impact. And if you actually look at it, that's what my journey has been. I work with processes and systems that, help with mindsets and culture and that produce impact, whether it's, wealth as in results for the company, right, for the business, or it's, with evolved skill sets for the workforce. So I think it all comes together.
So you are definitely very busy in your role, but are you still able to set aside time for professional development? And if so, what kind of activities do you do?
Yes, everybody has only 24 hours a day, so you have to prioritize, and you cannot always be working. So, it's that story about sharpening the saw. You're so busy cutting trees and your saw isn't sharpened anymore. And so you can really do whatever you're doing in a better way. I do spend time in self-development, and it can come from a variety of areas. Either I'm, sometimes it's just reading a book. I do attend, webinars on topics. I do attend, again, there's a lot of content there, whether it's masterclass or LinkedIn or Coursera or Pluralsight. I mean, there's lots of choices. So this is the other reason you have to prioritize. And so I put goals as to what I want to learn about, what is the areas I want to focus on. And then I just spend time, and usually it'd be like a Friday afternoon, block 2 hours and make time for it. Because if you don't prioritize, you'll be just cutting trees and not sharpening the saw.
I love that description of trying to cut the trees with a dull saw. I've never heard that before, and I love it. You are also quite active on LinkedIn. So how do you use this to grow your professional network and your personal brand?
So I wasn't first a few years ago, not very active on LinkedIn. So I had a picture and a bio, and then a few years ago I really looked at what is this platform? It cannot be just browsing and clicking like and celebrate, and I really thought about how can this be a space? It's like a personal spot for you from a professional space that is always there, even when you're not in the room. So I thought about how do you make it work, and what is the value you can get, and so actually build the profile first. I spent on not having too long texts, and I put on what is really meaningful, what is the accomplished I've done. So I think it's in itself is learning, what is your personal brand? First to know that, and then express it there and many other places. But I'm saying that itself, that's a Friday afternoon activity for you for self-development. And I do have a book for that too. In terms of networking, again, it has to be intentional network. That means that you make a connection, but then you have to make it meaningful. So I typically follow up with them. I do make more connections than I can follow up, but I do go back to them and do it like a meet and greet. And, you never know, these conversations can always lead to new engagements or new insights or new connection even, so you just let it grow organically.
Yeah, I think that that's a really great idea. And I love what you said about it being there when you're not in the room. It's something that can be a part of you when you're not even around. And And I think that's a great way of thinking about it. You're not always available all the time, but your LinkedIn always is there.
To make sure it's worth it,
Yeah, definitely. Spend your Friday afternoon on that, guys.
That's right. That's right.
So many of our listeners are younger. So as someone in a leadership role who has probably, mentored students and employees before, what advice would you give to someone who is interested in working as a data scientist or a data analyst?
I would say, first of all, be curious, because that sort of, lends itself to do anything with data, because there's so much data always. We have generated more data now than ever in history put together. So every day and every minute we're generating more data than all of history put together. So there's a lot of data, and that's why it makes sense to understand, what is meaningful, what is not. And you won't even know that until, there's a lot of tests and experiments to do. So that's where curiosity comes in. So be curious about it. The curiosity will lead to, structuring what is the question you're trying to ask. We talk about, start with why. So why is a good exercise to look at what is framing that business question or organization's question, and then that gives you the focus, because there is a lot of noise in the data, and so it's about how do you remove that noise and look at how do you get that insight out. So again, as I say, it's not about, we've analyzed the data and here's the report, but what happens after the report? What kind of the report has to generate dialogue, it has to generate conversation, so those insights, from the data and insights from the experts in the room, that man and machine coming together, right? So that is where the most value is. So how do you, as a data analyst or data specialist or data scientist, make that platform available where those insights are generating the right conversations for action?
I think that it can be easy to get bogged up in, I got the data, I analyzed the data, I made the report. I got the data, I analyzed the data, I made the report. And I really like how you're emphasizing, what is the point? Why are you doing this? There's a reason that you are looking at this data, and that's important. Make sure you know why you're looking at this, and go for it and figure out why, and make sure there's a reason, and then make a difference as to why you're looking at the data and what's the point. I think that's so important.
And those insights have to make a change, have to make a movement. Otherwise, you just, generating reports for the sake of generating reports.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty is that's applicable to any business function, any level, anybody using data. Is again, how do you tell that story? Mm-hmm. How do you bring the text, the visual, and the narrative to provide context and meaning to what you just analyzed with data?
Sunita, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Heather. It was so fantastic to talk with you today, and we covered so much in this little time. I cannot believe that we packed it all, so I'm sure the students will want to know more. Again, I hope they're curious to know more, because curiosity brings a different perspective. So stay curious.
And to all of our listeners, if you haven't already, check out our previous podcasts. They're available wherever you listen to podcasts. And for more information about starting your career as a data analyst, go to dataanalytics.buffalostate.edu. And don't forget to subscribe so that you get a notification each time we release a new episode of Buffalo State Data Talk.